and hello everybody. So I shall just share my screen.
Yeah, hopefully this will work.
Start my presentation. Where is it? It's always that one. There we go. Right, can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Yep. Right,
Oh, I can. Hopefully everyone can.
Cool. Let me move. Just got to move everybody out of the way first. There we go. Right. So does that look good?
Perfect.
Right. Right, yeah, so as Charlotte said, XLwerks. So I started XLwerks, it's nearly 2 years in May, with a big chunk taken out by pandemic-ish. But we're sort of more of a collaborative practice. And this is just a few of the names we're working with at the moment. So on the left-hand side are our sort of architecture and design companies, HNNA from London, for our urban design practice, KYRF Architecture, based in Norwich with Jim Ross, all from Farrow, who are doing the interiors with it, Digi-Tech, and I'll talk about that, and Synfo, which is Nigel Hargreaves, and we look at circular economy and energy efficiency strategies with Nigel. In the middle there, we've got Eggbox Studios, who help with our visualization and modeling for the mixed reality work. Interreality Labs are a Microsoft partner who we're working with on some projects at the moment, and they specialize in HoloLens and mixed reality development. And Myriad Global Media, VR company, and an AR company that we're working with on a project as well at the moment. So that's that little intro over with. So I thought I'd kind of explain how I ended up at this point as a little sort of journey over the last 18 months into this mixed reality world. It kind of started, I think, when I decided to move on from my last job at ProWorks and Lampro in Norwich. And during that final 12 months there, I was working and project managing the Digi-Tech Factory bid at City College Norwich with copy architects and the rest of the local design team of K Consulting and Design, Clancy Consulting, and I'm going to forget somebody, aren't I? That's about it, I think, and City College. And during that process, we had to engage with tech companies in Norwich, which was really interesting, looking at the scope and breadth of sort of quite groundbreaking business in Norwich. And there was also a whole discussion about technology and the crossover with future skills into construction and design as well, because there's a construction skills course at City College, as most know. So that got me to thinking about a new business and what kind of things a new business should be considering when they're trying to make themselves a bit more robust. So for the ideas for the next 10 years to look forward, see where the direction of travel was, and look to embrace those elements and essentially build a company that was going to start to look into this, because I had the flexibility to do it as my own business. So around about the same time, I came across a launch that Microsoft did. Now, I hadn't heard of HoloLens. HoloLens 1 came out in 2016, and then I saw Alex Kipman do a presentation at the mobile phone conference in Spain, I think, and demonstrating HoloLens 2. And that's the actual headset on the right there. It's an untethered holographic mixed reality headset. So it's not VR. That's the important thing to remember. This is very different. You are projecting a hologram onto your real world experience, but I'll go into that a bit more detail shortly. Images like this were shown, which was quite inspiring. So I got very excited. And then also they talked about their team up with Trimble for a site-ready HoloLens headset. I had seen HoloLens 1 used on site before, but to see a company like Trimble getting behind this as well kind of indicated that there were some quite exciting things going on in the industry from this point of view. So I looked into a bit more, and these are the kind of research I came up with, Bentley, working with Microsoft on project management and design review software, you know, the ability to overlay structural solutions in situ on site. And this kind of felt to me, along with the fact that we had international leaders, Trimble in terms of software and hardware supplied to the industry, Microsoft, Autodesk, we're linking up with Unity. And Unity is a games engine, which is the other interesting crossover element. Unity is a games engine which allows you to take information and write code for the HoloLens. So there seemed to be this real groundswell of change happening in the hardware and software industry, which of course influences the direction of travel for design and construction. So the more I looked into it, the more I became convinced that this is going to be the game changer. And we invested in 2 headsets. We were one of the first companies in the UK to get these last year in February. I hadn't had a go on one at that point, so it was a real leap of faith, but I'd seen enough to convince me that it would work. And thankfully, we were pretty blown away by it. That's Matt, Part 1 student, was working with me at the time. And this is the actual careers event we did with City College Norwich last year, just before lockdown, in fact. So just very briefly on the HoloLens. Now, the reason we focused on the HoloLens, there are other products out there. There's something like Magic Leap, which works perfectly well, but I believe that's a tethered device with a controller. The thing about the HoloLens is totally self-contained. It's packed with sensors, which allow you to overlay the holograms. We've got a carbon case, got a very tough cover here for the actual lens, so that the actual HoloLens itself is an amazing piece of engineering. In fact, the whole thing is an amazing piece of engineering. There's such a huge amount of technology compacted into one headset. It's quite mind-boggling, and I'll just show you quickly in a minute. You have inbuilt audio speakers, that's spatial audio. Then you've got sensors here at the front which track your hands, so you're interacting with the holograms and selecting things with your hands. There's no paddles like VR. There's no separate control. And these cameras on the side are constantly scanning your environment, which is one of the key things. So it's got a constant memory of your space that you're in, which allows it to anchor holograms in the spaces. On the back, you've got a battery. Now, obviously, there's a lot of stuff here, so they're not cheap. They're like 2,800, I think, starting price. But it is basically a computer, a major piece of hardware on your head. Here's some examples. I think on the right is the HoloLens 2. That's the circuitry that they started working out. So all of that stuff is reduced down into that headset you saw, which is quite astounding, really. So it's Microsoft call this never seen before technology on Earth, which is pretty impressive when you think about that. And the fact that we can buy it is another step as well. The key thing behind the HoloLens is the something called the micro electromechanical system. These are very small lasers that build up the hologram. They fire along a set of mirrors, which are very small, and it gets projected down into the lens. That is that system, and it's about the size of a fingernail, so it's very small. So once we got the HoloLens, we started kind of like just, I don't know, almost flailing around a bit, really. But the key thing that we did was we also got Trimble HoloLens Connect for HoloLens, which allowed us to quickly get involved in modeling stuff in SketchUp and importing various 3D files. So these are very early days, you know, testing out in the corridor work. My kitchen table on the coast, me doing a monolith, and kind of engaging pre-lockdown with different consultants, getting their initial feedback. And I think one of the great things we found that is very intuitive. That's the other thing. There's my 8-year-old perfectly at home using it while being closely monitored, for sure. I think this might be the first video. So this is the first, so there's going to be a few videos. So this was the work we did at the careers fair last year with City College Norwich, focusing on the Digi-Tech Factory building. And this is using a plugin for the HoloLens called Guides, which Guides is designed as a training tool, but we kind of turned it into a 3D slideshow for students to try. So one of the other things that you get with HoloLens, you'll see a dot floating around. So this is eye tracking. So you can select things using eye tracking. So you just kind of direct your gaze towards the arrow and it brings up a slideshow of elements. So this was quite an exciting first go. So we literally had it for about a month at this stage. And we used the Revit model that had been done by Coffee Architects and imported that and adapted it to show the kids different scenarios, structure. So yeah, this was one of my first attempts. So went down really well. And the great thing was that the students could use it very quickly, which was excellent. I will stop that. Go on to the next one. So that was one of our first delves into it. And we could see that there was a lot of potential. And then we went into lockdown. And I think over lockdown, I had a chance to really sort of reflect and get to know the software and the hardware. So mainly using Trimble Connect for HoloLens and the HoloLens itself. And it seemed to me that there was an opportunity here to try and engage with design teams and construction in terms of how this technology might be used on a real project. And we had Digi-Tech Factory about to start on site. And the idea that we might be able to do something that ran in parallel to the main contract that allowed staff to use this and so kind of road test it on a real site, because I was well aware that, it could just be a fancy piece of technology, shiny thing, but we needed to use it in anger and get feedback from people on site, and also talk to the students, talk to the clients about it. So I came up with the idea with construct.XR, which is a kind of research program, which we've done. We've now got a couple of projects under it. One is Digi-Tech Factory, the other is Norwich Castle, which we'll come on to. So Norwich construct.XR launched in August last year, has its own website, and we've also got a YouTube channel as well. And we do vlogs. Sometimes you have to look at me droning on video. So we try and explore different aspects of using what is the Trimble XR10 headset. That was the other thing that we've purchased to go with this. So that's the site version that enables us to use this on site and on construction situations. So when we launched the project construct.XR, we purchased 2 XR10s, and that's the XR10. That's me unboxing it, very, very excited. Interesting thing here, this is a bone induction headset, so that sits just above your ears, so you can wear ear defenders and earplugs, because it obviously gets very noisy on site. So the first project was Digi-Tech Factory, and our initial work looked at structures and engagement with carters and Clancy and other scenarios. So we're kind of working through that now. There's another video here. So this is, so let's just go back to that one. So we initially started by overlaying the main structure, so this is the subcontractor's 3D file, which we uploaded into Trimble Connect. The way that works is Trimble Connect is a cloud-based system. So you upload the models onto Trimble Connect, and then they download onto the headset via wireless, Wi-Fi or 5G connection. And you can position the models using a couple of ways of doing this. You can either reference an existing element. So in the first instances, we use the Creative Arts building, and you kind of anchor an X, Y, and a Z coordinate, which relates to the model, and then it brings it in at full scale. So this was quite an interesting test on accuracy. Since we tested the steelwork anchoring, which worked really well, Trimble have brought out a way of anchoring using a QR code, which would be a lot easier and less time consuming. But we're going to try that shortly on some interiors work. So we tested out very much different scenarios. This is Carter's site setting out engineer, who was pretty taken aback by the opportunities for this in terms of remote queries, remote setting out. And, I think at the moment, the accuracy, you might not set your main structure out using the headset, but I think as a checking, as a checking piece, it's definitely something that works in terms of structure. And I'll talk about Norwich Castle shortly, that has actually been happening. Some photos at the bottom there. We went to all the offices of the consultants involved and allowed them to have a go. So there's an element of training in that as well. And this is, which bit this? So this is a recent one actually. This is overlaying of some interior layouts. It was just a very quick test to show how you can look at furniture layouts, and also you can see the interface a bit there. So there's a bit of lag on the video because the headset's actually putting it together. You don't get that on site. But you do see stuff triangulated quite regularly. So it's always scanning for your hands as an interactive element. So this is just some desking layout. So the great thing about it is you're constantly aware of your surroundings. So it's different to VR in that you're kind of anchored in your space all the time. And the very odd thing about it is, I think when I put this on, I almost went to put down one of my gloves on one of those tables because it gets very convincing after a few while. The other interesting thing that we found is that the CAD files come in and can be overlaid. So again, for setting out, once you get an accurate lock, you can use a 2D layout as well. So that was just looking at furniture layouts. Now, what you will see is that there, some of the detail on the chairs isn't high end. That's because there is a restriction on the headset because it's not, it's not a supercomputer in there, but it's a good PC, a good, GPU. But there is a limit on the amount of detail it can show in terms of three-dimensional solid objects. So there is a limit of, for those that will know what I'm talking about, 10,000 polygons, which is not huge. So polygons are the little triangles that make up all of these solid elements. However, in terms of coordination and structural models, that's perfectly acceptable. It can go higher, and I'll talk about that later. So this is another recent test at Digi-Tech. So this is using the XR10 headset, but we're using something called Remote Assist, which is a link to Microsoft Teams. And it allows you to mark up during a live call to your design team. They can also share drawings with you. So in terms of coordination and on-site queries, this is great. And we've got really great feedback from this. The best thing about it is you can both mark up in 3 dimensions, which is pretty mind-blowing. So during the session, Clancy and Clear Consulting Design were on call with us. This is us marking up some ducting. But the blue arrows were done by Adam Simpson, and the pink markups were done by me. So it's very collaborative. It's instant. You're on a call. It's live. Yeah, an ability to share drawings and just problem solve on the fly with this, and it's hands-free, is very exciting. Everybody was really pleased with the way this went. So I think the next thing we're going to do is try and test a group call into this. This was just a one-on-one, but this is just a group call. Okay. So so with Digi-Tech, that's where we are at the moment. We've just done the most recent one was the remote assist test, which I just showed you. The second project that we've been working on with Consibee engineers is the Norwich Castle project. So this is a very intensive remodeling of the interior of the Grade 1 listed ancient monument Castle Keep. And there's a lot of steelwork. So the sort of middle model here is the Revit model at the Consibee studios. There's a lot of steelwork in here. And the images below, they're more graphically refined representations of the work that we've been doing. I mean, essentially, they're removing the floors, making new voids, and restoring it to its previous layout as a palace. So coordination of the steelwork with the existing structure is really important for Consibee's, well, for the whole team. Top right here is the client, Norfolk Museum Service. Again, their feedback was really positive. For them to be able to see even the structural model in situ, they found really exciting, and it kind of re-engaged their concept of the proposal. It became sort of reinvigorating, and it also helped them immensely in terms of visualizing how it was going to look, which they'd never seen before. They'd never seen it at scale in that space, which was very exciting. Here's a video, another video. So this is the first time we were on site. Apologies for those sort of rapid head movements. It's quite, because you're filming through the headset, it's basically obviously logged to the movement of your head, so it can get a bit jerky. So this is the new floor that's going in on the upper levels. New lift shaft. So when we tried this out, Consibee immediately thought this is possibly extremely useful for our coordination purposes. So what we've been doing with them since then, this was a free test. Sorry. So, there we go. We've now been working with Consibee's to use something called, they've been importing the current model into the space, and then we've been testing out something called to-dos, which is part of the Trimble Connect for HoloLens. Now, to-dos is kind of like marking up. I haven't got footage of them marking it up because Consibee used both headsets and did it together, but they've used this to great effect. It allows you to explore the model at one-to-one and tag areas of interest, and also take a photo and make a note. And those to-dos are then uploaded to the model, which is held on the Trimble Connect cloud server. This is quite interesting. So this is a Logon process. It's quite simple. There's an app, and you scan a QR code to get into the cloud, and then these are how the projects are laid out in Trimble Connect. So this has to be downloaded via a Wi-Fi or broadband connection. And selection, as you can see, is all via, there's kind of two things you do with the two main things you do. You can point, and then you also do a pinch action. And there you can see the headset scanning the space and allowing you to position a model. So we'll just fast forward a bit there. So this is with the model at full scale. And this is me tagging a to-do in that model. So it's got various bits of information attached to it. And what happens is once you've tagged that, it feeds it up to the cloud. And then later on back at the office, you can, the to-do notification is there. That's me taking a photo. So what Consibee is using this for is to do exactly that process, do an audit of the current structural scheme on site and take photos and go back to the office and then review the elements and do a more detailed review of setting out and possible problem areas. So we're lined up to do another 2 sessions with Consibee on this. I think the interesting thing here is the fact that it's actually become part of Consibee's workflow. Whereas at Digi-Tech Factory, we're kind of on a non-critical path, secondary project. With Consibee, you know, this has become part of their workflow. So that's been really exciting for them. And this is me, you know, kind of back at the office, opening up a to-do. There's going to be refinements to this process as it goes forward. And in fact, I think there's an update coming for HoloLens, Trimble Connect for HoloLens very soon. So yeah, that was a successful test. So I think that's kind of where we're at the moment in terms of those 2 projects. I'll talk about it in a minute, but we're kind of looking for a 3rd project, and we've linked up with BIMSafe. So there's talks going on about the 3rd project coming on board for that. So that's looking at health and safety and how mixed reality might help in those things. But I think the overall feedback we're getting so far, because we've got another 6 months to go on this, because it's not a project that's going to go on forever. So there's a finite end to it. Probably the end of this year, I think, is when construct.XR will come to an end, and we'll log all the feedback and do reports for our clients, etc. I think the biggest thing that's been fed back to us is this democratization of 3D data. So the idea that we can take BIM models and the client can engage them, students have engaged with them. It's the ability of people on site to get an idea of how things are working in 3D very quickly using the headsets. Coordination is definitely going to be improved. The idea that we can improve space planning by testing out layouts one-to-one with clients and ergonomics of those layouts. Collaboration, of course, with things like remote assist. And the other thing is, because it isn't a closed experience, we're not getting the disorientation that a lot of people sometimes get with VR. So that's one of the things I'd not really engaged with VR previously because it was a very closed experience, whereas HoloLens totally breaks that barrier to the real world. So it's this overlaying of data onto our real world is kind of the big game changer here. There has been some challenges. You need a good Wi-Fi connection. Although Trimble Connect for HoloLens works offline now, so you can upload models beforehand and then overlay them. So that works. But to do things like the to-do lists and obviously the remote assist, you do need a connection. And sometimes that can be challenging on site, but it's getting better. We have found that there's an issue with externally, you sometimes get the HoloLens with bright conditions, they can be washed out. And we've tested out things like ski goggle overlays, which do work, but kind of make you look a bit ludicrous. The Polygon Limit can be a problem because the amount of detail. Sometimes if you've got a really large model, so the previous images I showed of everybody stood around a really detailed image of a building, you can't get with just the headset processing power. But there is a solution to that, which I'll come on to. I've found that, you know, if there's a really high wind, the headset struggles, and I think that's probably because it sets up vibrations in the headset, and possibly there's a lot of particles flying around in the air. It's worth noting. But I probably shouldn't have tried using it on a beach, which is what I did try it out on. And also, you've got to be, because the headset relies on your hands interaction with the holograms. It needs to recognize them easily. And I found that I had some red and black sight gloves and they didn't work. So there's no major issues. There's just a few nuances that need to be taken into consideration. So I've got some great sight gloves now. So just in terms of the next steps, as I said, we're going to be teaming up with BIMSafe to look at some work in the future. I think we're going to test out the ability to do the remote design review meetings, which is something that you can do on Trimble Connect. I did try it last year, but I've got no footage from that, and it works really well. It works really well. So we're hoping, I think the thing we're going to do is we're going to have at least 2 or 3 members of the design team calling in from other offices, and then they're represented by a very simple avatar. And you are all on call together. So that would be quite exciting. Use the QR codes for anchoring models on site. Something we're going to do. I'll talk about this in a bit. Not deployment of point cloud renders to HoloLens 2. So this is something that the Norwich Castle client was asking about, and a few people have actually. So this is possible, and even though there's a huge amount of information, the ability to do something called remote rendering, which is offered by Microsoft now to the headset, is where you use really powerful computers, either your own, which can then supply the render to the headset over a Wi-Fi connection, or you can do it via a render farm, which I have done, and I'll show an example later. We've been asked to do some beta testing with Trimble, who we've been working quite closely with for the next upgrade to Connect for HoloLens. So that'll be really exciting. And yeah, more stuff on the remote rendering, which I'm pretty excited about, but I'll show you a bit more detail on that later. Oh, and here it is. Another video. So this is a test that Microsoft published last year, which I did over my home Wi-Fi, which you can see by the various stacks of books and odd things in the background. Not my children, they're not odd. So what's happening here is the model is being rendered in Western Europe at a render farm. It's been fed back to my PC that then transmits it to the headset via a website address. That's all happening extremely quickly because, you know, the headset has to transmit where it is in space, and then the model has to be rendered to suit that. But the amount of detail that I got was pretty mind-blowing. It'll just come up. This is the model loading here now. Sorry about the delay. But this is an engine model. What you'll see here is you'll see some bits missing. That doesn't happen in the headset in your real-time view. Because the headset here is using a camera and it's kind of reconstructing the view, the camera actually can't cope with this amount of detail in these areas. So, but this was pretty mind-blowing, the level of detail you were getting with a hologram that you could then stick your head into, which you'll see in a minute. So this is the level of detail that we'll be able to achieve in those kind of design review situations if you use the remote rendering. Also, one thing we're going to try is doing this kind of outdoors using 5G, which will be interesting to see if that works, because that could open up a whole new level of testing out designs on site. Let's just fast forward. So you can, this is me putting my head inside the engine, which is quite exciting to do. Come on, show me. Yeah. So you can go inside. So the whole inside of the engine was rendered as well. So you could look at the intersection and explore it that way as well. So yeah, so this remote rendering has been officially released by Microsoft now, because that was the testing element. Not long now, don't worry. So next steps for us, I think we've got to finish construct.XR, which has got hopefully get another one on board soon. That'll be the 3 projects, which is kind of where we thought it might hit. I think the next thing we're looking at, which was kind of one of the things that got us really excited at the beginning, was this application of mixed reality and potential urban design applications. And it's using public consultation, which we've been discussing with clients as well. So we are going to be launching Urban XR soon. We do have one project with a regional town underway at the moment, but I can't say anything more about that yet. So Urban XR is kind of going to be a next exciting look, I think, especially in terms of the context of high streets. And also the advent of phone AR and also this kind of mid-range wearable technology, which are AR glasses, and all of these new headsets which are coming out, or wearable tech or glasses, whatever you want to call it. They're all kind of looking at this the construction industry and its applications, and also manufacturing. We've got a commission at the moment to look at offshore wind with a client. That's for a marketing piece actually at the moment, but we'll have to see. We'll see where that goes. So those are 2 slightly different commissions we've achieved, not straight architectural. So they are the first Urban XR project is a AR project looking at mobile phone use, and the offshore wind is a marketing piece. So I think once we've finished looking more closely at the use cases, where our move will be to look at bespoke application development. And that's kind of something we've got planned for probably the middle to the end of this year. I spoke about the wearable tech. And I think I've just put some thoughts down now about how this might impact the industry. So I think one of the problems, I think, with the construction industry, it is notoriously slow to adapt. I think I'm still surprised about the fact that BIM is not used on all projects, and it isn't. And I think one of the challenges here, speaking to people about building information modeling, is it takes time up front, and the kind of whole process is skewed now, where you're so squeezed in terms of time to get to tender. And that can be heavily influenced by funding and finances, and when it's available, is that there's a default to the old, 2D and CAD. Quick and dirty, I think, is the word that's used quite a lot of the time. But that's improving with file interpretability, of course. And it is happening. It has happening. But I think one of the interesting upturns of the pandemic has been that a lot of boards and companies are thinking about tech a bit more. Sometimes that kind of just goes as far as using Teams, which is fine. But what we're seeing, feedback we're getting with things like HoloLens, and what I see is this. I think it could really break down a lot of barriers to BIM adoption and that sort of legacy of BIM. So the value of a 3D model through the whole life of the project can kind of fall down post completion, potentially in some instances. And I think its ability to be engaged with by clients via technology like HoloLens, and also via facilities management personnel, etc., and also on a construction site, that the guy putting up the ceiling can use the BIM model of the ceiling to set out things like that. And And I think there's also, something we've been doing at both at City College is talking to the students. It's really exciting for them, and it kind of changes. I think it's got the ability to change the image of the construction industry by adopting tech like this and being on board with it. But that's going to need, changes at the top. I think the message has been at conferences like Prop Tech in Paris, which I went to last year or the year before, God, can't remember, is that, if the industry doesn't adapt, companies will get left behind. So now is the time, really. And all the major tech companies have looked at design and construction, and they think this is the next space to innovate in. And that's why, you've got companies like Boston Dynamics, who before you associated with doing robots for, the US defense industries. Now they've released Spot, and Trimble have teamed up with them. So we've got robots coming soon to a site near you, potentially. And I think this whole sort of melting pot of tech that's gradually coming to the surface for construction and design, it might not take as long to take hold as people think. I think the adoption rates are going to get higher and higher with bigger companies behind them. And I think also recently Microsoft Mesh was launched by Microsoft. So this is a way of making it a lot easier for people to use technology like this and plug-in experiences. That was launched 2 weeks ago by Microsoft. So that's improving collaboration, but also it kind of formalizes this remote rendering ability for the HoloLens. On the right here is an image of a gentleman who is kind of walking around an underground station layout, and that is scanning the layout as he walks. So it's building a model, which is on the right here. And the interesting thing about this is that it starts to form a network that you can then use to analyze people movements, as long as they sign up to, these things being tracked. You can also kind of anchor AR experiences as well. And the other thing about things like Spot is that, they can operate 24 hours. So your building could be scanned every day, potentially, which allows you to do checking to the BIM model, things like that. That could be a little bit of time way off, but who knows? And I think with all of this coming to market in the next 2-3 years, it has struck me, I think one of the pieces of feedback that I've had on site is contractors actually, and other people saying, God, if we'd have only had this the other week, we could have sorted that problem out quickly. And one of the things that did strike me is that, there's a kind of push towards fixing design early, prefabrication offsite, which I think, definitely has its place. But I think one of the things that struck me about this is in terms of as communication increases, connectivity increases, access to the 3D model increases, and everybody's working off the same, and you can do this on site. I think the opportunity for construction to be actually more agile on site comes into focus potentially. So you may find decisions happening on site more collaboratively as opposed to all up front. So it could flip the dynamic potentially, which is one of the things that interests me. And I think ultimately, more coordination, more collaboration, better understanding leads to less waste on site, less conflict. It's a very stressful industry. We all know that. And I think if those things can be addressed, you get a more sustainable outcome for everybody. So yeah, that's it. Have I gone over my time? I don't know. So yeah, thanks. That's it for now. I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you. That was perfect. Thank you very much. That was really great. As I said at the beginning, that was a topic I basically knew zero about before you started talking. So I've learned a lot tonight.
just above 0.
I now know a lot more. I found it really interesting to see the stuff, as I'm sure everybody did, at the work you've been doing at Norwich Castle. Those images there were amazing. Really interested to see that. I mean, have you found that you've had to convince people to use this? Other, the structural engineers, clients, or architects and things, or do you think most people have been quite?
I think, if I'm perfectly honest, I don't know. It's difficult. I think the architectural interest has been limited, but it's difficult to know. I mean, everybody's kind of in the thick of trying to do their job. Do you know what I mean? That's the other thing. It's difficult to find the time and space to do this kind of research. And I think obviously Digi-Tech it's kind of a good match in terms of projects and team wise. So I think that's worked there. In terms of the castle, I did a free demo for Consibee, and that kind of sold them on it, really. I think that's been really fascinating to see them actually use it in their workflow. So we're a subcontractor to Consibee, enabling them to use the software and the headsets. So yeah, we'd like to do some more work on existing buildings. I think actually that's quite an interesting aspect for sure. It kind of does come into its own a lot more a bit once you've got a bit further down the line. So in terms of M&E coordination, structural coordination with existing structures, I think that's obviously a very strong use case for it.
Yeah,
sure.
I can see that. I can think already of a few projects I've done in the past where I spent a long time trying to coordinate ceiling heights, structures, M&E, etc., where this would have been much easier. So yeah, I can definitely see the benefit. I'm going to open the floor up to questions. We've already had a couple in the comment section, or in the chat even. Mark, did you want to unmute yourself, turn your video and ask your question yourself? Or
Yeah, I can do. Hi James. Yeah, it was good. I'm just interested in the Revit side of things, bringing the models in and things like that, because obviously Revit models these days are getting fairly sizable.
Yes.
Bringing those in, is there a size limit, or how does that best work?
Yeah, there is a size limit at the moment, so we have had to strip some back to get them onto the headset for the castle work, because of that polygon limit. Strip it back, but I think once it needs to take that step towards the remote rendering to be able to get a full Revit model into the headset. So you've got to be connected to a powerful machine that can cope with that scale of model.
Yeah. Okay.
As it stands at the moment, you kind of need to just back various what you want to look at. Kind of be a bit more bespoke.
So a bigger model that you weren't looking for so much detail in the imagery, more the actual content would probably be the best way of using it.
At the moment, yeah, it needs to be kind of almost targeted as to what you want to look at, I think. Certainly. So the structural model from Consibee, the whole thing came in. It did rationalization on the detail in the beams and stuff like that. And Trimble Connect does actually manage that for you. It will rationalize the model. You don't quite know what's been rationalized though. That's the problem. So I think it's got a bit of way to go until you can get the whole model in. That's really connected to the remote rendering capability.
Yeah. The
image I showed of Microsoft show, it's used quite a lot of people stood around a table with a very complex model in it. I mean, the industry does suffer from a lot of aspirational images like that. that is possible. It just, I think the platform isn't quite there yet to deliver it.
Yeah.
I think with the rolling out of Microsoft Mesh, that's what it's being. That's one of the things it's designed for. So
Okay.
I would say probably in a couple of years, maybe a year, 18 months, things like that will start appearing.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Always.
thank you. Thanks, Mark. Elsie has a question as well. I don't know if you want to unmute yourself to ask your question yourself. Maybe not. Okay, I will read. Elsie's got a three-part question here. So she has said, was there any research done on whether this virtual technology affects eyesight, and is there anti-glare technology built in?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I've actually had quite a lot of discussions with UEA last year about trying to do some research into this, because it was one of the things that really fascinated me, because they have a vision and action lab at UEA. We were trying to get something lined up where we could look at this, but you kind of always have to align with our researchers' projects, and it kind of didn't quite happen. I think it's interesting in terms of, I think you've always got to design the content with that in mind. So one of the things we've been talking about on site is like, how long can you wear it for? Is there any effect on that or eye strain? Now, I think I got a new pair of glasses recently, and I had a discussion with the opticians about this. The fact that I was concerned about the fact that, you know, am I just constantly looking at an image here in front of my eyes? Am I constantly having to readjust? But that's not what happens. Your eyes are looking beyond the hologram. I know it sounds really bizarre, but it's not affecting, you know, if you're looking at something at distance and your eye thinks that's what's happening, that is actually what's happening, because the HoloLens is firing photons that are specially designed to create that image on the back of your retina. So it's kind of, it's a weird mix of magic and technology. But I do think it's worth looking into that more with UEA once everybody starts to get back to normal, because, you know, there's things about peripheral vision, there's things about what colors work, what's distracting in various circumstances. I think the good thing about that, it does have a restricted field of view, so it's quite wide, but the extremities are clear of holograms, and that's quite important, I think, for safety and just recognition of surroundings. So yeah, did that answer that question? I think so.
I think so. I hope Elsie thinks so. She's got kind of two. She said she hasn't got a microphone, so she can't come on. But her second and the third parts are kind of related. She said, but on-site review, will wearing this device pose any danger to the individual performing the task? And then question 3, approvals required for the use on construction site by local building departments for insurance, safety purposes, etc.
Yeah, I mean, you do have to do a risk assessment. I think so at Digi-Tech, there's always two people, but we would made sure that, I think you kind of need to manage the situation for sure, because you do need to be aware of your surroundings. So you kind of, we've made sure it's in an area that doesn't have active works going on. So it's kind of, you do have to, you know, prepare yourself for it. So that, you know, the scenario where everybody's walking around with a HoloLens on at the moment, or an XR10 headset, is not there. I think you carry out specific tasks whilst wearing the equipment, and I think, you know, we've had to do risk assessments and things like that for it. You don't need approval from third parties. Obviously, the contractor needs to be comfortable with what you're doing. The headset is fully approved with the hard hat. Trimble went through that process, so it's usable on.
Okay, great, thank you. Rob has a question. Rob, did you want to come on and talk to us?
Why not? Hello. It's really interesting just as a communication tool, like getting lay clients involved, but also, you know, it's great on site, but in terms of planning and planners, has there been any interest, or is that where the XR Urban's coming in? I'm just thinking like Anglia Square, things like that would be sort of interesting.
That's a good, yes, good leader question. To be perfectly honest, when I first saw it, I thought, wow, this could really revolutionize planning and engagement and, you know, consultation. And I think I have had conversations with the City Council about it. The feedback from one of the planners was that, yeah, this looks like it would be very useful, because you can get a visual impact assessment very quickly, and you can take photos and take video footage from the headset. Now, obviously, the highlight is that you can't use a huge amount of detail, so you're not going to get a photorealistic view at the moment. But basic massing and scale can be modelled, and you can do that using the Trimble Connect software. It's sort of right now, really. We've tested.
So you could. Sorry,
Yeah.
I was going to say, you place a model, and then if you're getting a key view from City Hall or something like that, can you place the model by the castle and then see it from distance?
I don't know about the distance.
Right.
You can get pretty far away. I wouldn't be able to. That's something we're going to be testing with the Urban XR approach. I think certainly, I think it depends on the level of anchoring. I mean, what I have found, we've tested out a large sort of sort of master plan for housing on a kind of football pitch. And we did get something called drifting, where the model kind of just moves a bit. It's because the headset needs stuff around it to know where it is. So I think for urban situations, it's, in streets, it's very good. Whether it works at distance, I'm not sure. I think you probably still might have to look at other things for that, because you might not be able to, you've got to kind of be able to interrogate the detail behind that and the process it's going through to make it a legally standing piece of research. But certainly in terms of, initial massing and discussion about, in immediate vicinity of projects and in an urban environment, I think, yeah, that's something I'm very keen to do very soon. So if anybody's got any projects I can test it on, message me.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I've had another question here from someone without a microphone. James has asked, with this AR software, can you construct basic elements like walls and fences and move them around to give a sense of space and volume?
Yeah, I mean, in its most simple terms, you can make a SketchUp model and upload it to the headset and load it up at 1-to-1. Because Trimble owns SketchUp, it works perfectly fine. So in terms of moving stuff around in view, you can't, I mean, it's all down to the application. So with the Trimble app, you kind of load up your model and then it's there. You can't, if you want to change it, you need to kind of do that either you need to just change it and upload it again, but it's a very quick process. It can happen very quickly. The workflow is not complicated for that. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Any other? Elsie said, but thank you very much for your answers and the informative presentations. We're looking forward to the progress of this technology. That's great. Anybody else have any questions this evening? Either unmute yourself or just type them in the chat for us. Oh. David.
Hello. I did type something in. I'm unfamiliar with this technology, which is unsurprising as I'm now retired, but I want to be fantastic, really, really interesting, opens up a new world. And I'm just asking, beginning of my career, people had drawing boards and T-squares, and pretty much that was it. You just needed to have an office to work in. Middle of the career, people had computers and computer licenses and a few subscriptions, and that was about it. And now there's a raft of new technology and both software, hardware, and presumably licenses that have come in. It's interesting that you, as a very small practice, have been able to take that on board. But how far do you think the investment is going to be possible for sole practitioners or very small practices to take on board going forward for it to actually take root across the profession?
Yeah, well, totally. I think because, I mean, you know, I was lucky enough to be able to put that money in to get started. I think the commissions to the 2 projects have kind of almost paid themselves back, which is good, to a certain extent. But I think what you're going to see is over the next 2 years, there are other headsets coming to market. I mean, the HoloLens is kind of top end. There's nothing equivalent to it, apart from possibly a Magic Leap, but it doesn't do the untethered approach, I believe, that HoloLens does. I think I've been talking to a company in the States called New Eyes, who developed AR glasses that work with a Android phone, and that looks quite interesting. Their price point is £1,800 to £900. So they are working with similar stakeholders like Unity, and looking keenly at construction, and also their basis lies in Medicare. Their AR glasses were designed to help people diagnose and see via AR, but now they're pushing their product into sort of more the other industry sectors. So I think when you see that kind of price point coming out, that starts to become a lot more achievable. So I would say, I think within, and their mission is to basically have their headsets in mobile, you know, phone shops. So they're out now. I would say possibly within a couple of years, we're looking at something that might be slightly more affordable for more traditional solo practitioners. And the other thing is, I think there's the opportunity to, you know, share the hardware, share the technology. One of the reasons for construct.XR was to try and give people the opportunity to use it. You know, I need a little bit of money, but, you know, I'm quite happy to look at other things which are interesting. So I think there's that aspect which could be looked at. Might need a bit of a change in sort of attitude to collaboration, but because everybody wants their USP. But I think it's, yeah, I think the direction of travel with things like Revit and Bentley. I think within the next 2 years, you're going to see it a lot more affordable price tag.
Mm.
You're muted.
Yeah.
I said thank you very much. It was great.
Thank you, David. Anybody else? Any last questions this evening? Well, I thought that was great. Thank you very much. I mean, maybe when times get back to more normal, whatever, we'd be good to set up some, I don't know, quite like to see how these things work. And
yeah, I suppose that's the thing about it. You've kind of, it has to be worn to be experienced. It's been a bit of a challenge, but you know, we've got rigorous clean down protocols. So
I'm sure. Oh, I have another question just popped in. Elsie, again, one more question. Will the technology in the future perhaps upload an animated wheelchair to see how it will work within the space?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, totally. I think that idea of setting parameters in applications. I mean, basically, you know, the way of getting an app designed for the headset is you use, well, you can use other software, but Unity, which is kind of a gaming piece of software, and you set parameters and you set qualities, you know, so you could actually have you could, it would be like a VR experience essentially. So you could you kind of control the wheelchair moving around the space at 1-to-1 potentially. So yeah, that's it. Yeah, or it could even be just a like a bit like a character in a game. It could just have its own. We could just do his exploring on his own. You could watch it. But I think all that stuff's possible for sure.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for everybody's questions, and most of all, thank you very much to James Lee Burgess tonight, giving us that fascinating talk and insight into this new technology. Yeah, yeah, and as you said, if anyone has any projects, just get in touch with you.
Yeah, happy to have a chat. Apologies for my slightly looming lighting situation here.
Your Christmas lights in the background there.
Yeah, a bit ominous.
Great.
Well,
Thank you very much. Thank you for the talk, and thank you for everyone for joining us. We've got one more talk in our spring talk session, which is next Wednesday at 5 o'clock, and that is going to be a panel discussion about the recently published National Model Design Code. So there's information coming about that soon. That will be the same process. Book your tickets on Eventbrite. So hopefully see a few of you next week. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.